Okay,
I put a
good.
different background too. I'm in a different room, so keep.
That's cool, man. Well, we are live on Facebook and we're recording on Zoom. So once I turn my volume down, we won't have any kind of interruption here. So this is cool. We have part 2 of a conversation. We might have to call it the Chronicles of Paul Wertico, because Paul Wertico is my guest again today. Welcome, my friend. How you doing, man?
Good, Carol. How you doing, man?
I'm okay. If I'm talking about music, I'm doing pretty well. Otherwise, I forget everything these days.
Oh no.
Post-COVID brain stuff. But you
Well, you know,
guys,
it's funny. Part 2, because earwax control, which I think I talked
yes,
about in the last,
yeah,
version 1. When we did our second CD, we were going to call it Live Number 2.
mm-hmm.
Okay, because it was the second. It was going to be a second recording, Live Number 2, and then the label found out what we meant and they didn't do it, so then they put it out as just Live 2, which we were kind of drugged. It was like, oh no, and then I remember Jeff Check he was trying to justify it. It's almost like it's Spinal Tap. We're going, well, it's black. Well, it can't be more black than that. So Jeff's going, well, maybe it means live to, So I finally bought the rights to that.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah, I bought it out of Nemo, and then I called it Live Number 2. And if you see that, if you go on like CD Baby or Amazon, you can buy that. You'll cool. See it's not dirty, but my dog's kind of looking back outside.
See. It's also good marketing. It gets attention and it's catchy and
yeah, I mean,
that kind of stuff. You got to have some humor too in life, right?
Well, that's the thing. You got to have some fun,
People get so serious these days.
Well, anyway, so hopefully this won't be number 2 in our
it's conversation number 2. So yeah, we're this was fun. The first time, it's funny because I spent, as you know, and I'll just rehash just a slight bit. We talked a lot about your time with Pat Metheny, and then I actually saw you play in bars on the North Lincoln area or Lincoln Park area or whatever.
Lincoln Avenue.
Lincoln Ave, thank you.
Yeah.
82, 83, 84, maybe actually before that when I used to go visit, because every time I went to go visit my friends out in Evanston for 2 years before I moved there, we'd always hit places all the time because gigs were happening like every night.
It was like 52nd Street, in New York. It had club after club. You just bounce around,
totally.
And speaking of earwax control, I hate to harp on that, but I remember we played all the time. So the number 2 live CD was done at Orphans, which was on Lincoln Avenue. And we also a couple times we played at Wise Fool's Pub. Remember Wise Fool's Pub?
I remember Wise Fool's Pub.
And so we were so crazy that I remember the doorman didn't like, because we were totally free and out there, people would come in and he'd go, are you sure you want to go in?
Oh,
and then, we would have things like, I remember a piano player, a really good girl piano player, we invited her to sit in. So what did that mean for earwax control? Well, we put a chair on the stage and she just sat there while we played. So we would do stuff like that,
classic, man. See, you have a good sense of humor. I love that. That's cool.
No, you got to, especially in this day and age, wow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't remember all the places. I remember some of the bigger places that were more venues for touring artists like Park West and Rick's Cafe, Joe Siegel's. But the small clubs, I remember Orphans. I remember
Ratso's.
I've heard of that.
That was next door to Orphans. That was one where, like, you'd see Chick Corea play, or like some of the bigger bands would play there, as well as local bands. And then across the street was Colette's, where a lot of local bands played. And even with the earwax control, we played a weekend in Colette's, and I brought 3 truckloads of percussion to this gig. 75% of it went in the basement of Colette's because we couldn't fit it on stage, but I just wanted to have the option of having all that stuff, if I needed it. That's how dedicated we were. And we'd play, and I remember, like couple housewives came up to us and go, wow, this makes us want to go home and play with our kids' toys. I mean, we were avant-garde, but in a positive sort of like, way of inspiring people to kind of explore just the simple things in life again, not as artistes necessarily.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I remember another place on North Rush near one of the My Pies back then called Biddy Mulligan's.
Oh yeah, sure.
Remember that? But they had a
Oh yeah.
Tuesday night big band thing, and it was actually pretty good. We used to go down there, once, twice a month on a Tuesday and maybe sit in or not. My reading shops, once I got, like, I felt I could actually handle it, I sat in. So, yeah, it was fun. And the Navy Pier had the Jazz Fest back in the day before it was how it is now.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of great bands there. I remember seeing Stan Getz there with Adam Nussbaum.
Mm.
And then I was talking recently with, oh, man, I'm trying to think of who it was. I don't know, but we were talking about, but it might have been you. We were talking about Joe Siegel's Jazz Showcase.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking because it started at Roosevelt University,
Yeah.
and I kind of ran through the clubs, the different versions of the showcase, through the years.
Yeah, and that was fun, man. I remember so many good shows there. Max and Dexter. You said you saw maybe Cecil Taylor there with Ed Blackwell and
no, now with Ed Blackwell with Andrew Cyril and
oh, that's right,
Jimmy Lyons.
And they had to like turn the lights on to get him to stop playing.
Yeah. He was playing for like about 2 hours straight, and Joe Siegel, the owner, was trying to get him to stop, and they wouldn't stop, so he just turned on the fluorescent lights, and then they all just stopped immediately.
That's so funny. That is so funny. Well, so I was thinking, the first question in my mind, and we can bob and weave however you want. I would love to hear some of the things that you want to talk about and maybe play for us too. Some of the stuff that's unreleased or people don't know about. What's going on in the area in your world? Who are you seeing as let's go with this, and then we'll talk about influences. But who are you seeing out there right now who is just up and coming, and even if we never heard of them, who should be looking out for, like drummers or otherwise? Like, who's rocking your world right now?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's just tons of, like, especially a lot of like, like Black gospel influenced drummers, Eric Moore, and just millions. They're all kind of known because they've all got pop gigs now. That all kind of started. A lot of the gospel stuff kind of came through Chicago. And so, that's kind of the new thing in a lot of ways. I mean, so the guys that are playing with Snarky Puppy, people like that, and then, there's, the Dirty Loops. I'm really a big fan of the Dirty Loops.
Yeah, man. Those guys are.
Yeah, they're, the stuff's killing. Yeah, Leonard Lewis, I see Mike saying that,
Totally. Yeah, those guys are killing. They're crushing it.
Yeah, and as far as like, well, maybe it's either because I'm older, or just because the music isn't as revolutionary to me as it was. Maybe it is to young people because they're hearing things for the first time, so it seems like an epiphany. But a lot of stuff that I hear has kind of been played before. There's new variations. I mean, there's new techniques.
Sure.
People are playing in, all kind of time signatures and, the forms. I mean, the old AABA form and all that stuff is like, what used to be standards is not a standard anymore. People barely, on a jazz gig, all the things that we used to play, a lot of people don't even know those songs. So, it's just a different world. But, I'd rather talk about my influences, coming up.
Because I'm real curious about that. Because you have it, in my humble opinion and personal opinion, you're one of the things I love about you as a musician is that you have an identity that's very distinct. Like when you play, the trained listener will know, oh, that's Paul. And to me, that's, I think, becoming more, I really think because of all the stuff before us and the uniqueness before us. I'll say just us, speaking of me, let's say, because I'm 60. So before me, there's so many influences. Well, take somebody who's 25 or 30. I mean, how do
Yeah.
they go about developing their own voice? We know it's possible, but will they think of doing that? Is that their intention behind it? And then, we all come from influences. We're a combination of all these.
Right.
I tried to copy Cobham and Buddy Rich and Steve Gadd and Lenny White and Mike Clark and you and just so many people, but and Weckl and Vinny, but but that I didn't. You can't. First of all, if you want to be them, you can't because you're not,
Of course. Right.
and nor necessarily do I think you should be. So, knowing how you play and hearing you so much, and especially some of the stuff you sent me recently, which I was not aware of, was like, okay, this is freaking cool. Who are your influences?
Okay. Oh, before I forget, too, the drummer I was going to mention is Calvin Rogers, from Chicago, like one of the great gospel drummers. And I remember being turned on to gospel by one of my students at Roosevelt around like 2002, 2003. He was a black drummer and he turned me on to the gospel stuff. And I was like blown away. I remember even talking to Modern Drummer, like, wow, that you should write about like this guy, Calvin Rogers. So if you hear him play, and the stuff is amazing. So a lot of these guys are playing with the same passion, probably more technique, than a lot of people that we grew up. But when you look at what used to be, there were so many new things back then. I mean, if you look at the history of music, I mean, most stuff back in the day, if we go back 100 years, it was either in 2/4 time or 4/4 time, or maybe a waltz. Okay. Yeah. So imagine like in 1959, around that time, all of a sudden, you could take 5. So all of a sudden you have to learn how to play in 5, wow, big deal, and then, you go back a decade later or something, you have Don Ellis Orchestra, you have the Mahavishnu Orchestra playing all these. So nowadays, you have to play in all kind of meters. Like, with Pat Metheny, we played in 22/8. I mean, you don't even think about that stuff. So the doors have really been open to a lot of different types of music. But it back in the day, there were also completely new sounds too, and they were made by humans as opposed to machines. So if you look at, acoustic music, used to have just before amplification, really, you had trombones and trumpets and, acoustic bass, acoustic piano. And all of a sudden now, you electrify the guitar. Charlie Christian, plugs in the, electric guitar. Then all of a sudden, like when I was a kid, all of a sudden, you had jazz that was, the swing early jazz stuff was still around. I told you, last time I was playing, even sub for Barrett Deems with all those great players. But, you had all kind of new jazz. You had avant-garde jazz, and then you had fusion jazz. And then rock-wise, especially, late 60s through the 70s, every band sounded totally different. And so it was just a mingling of a lot of different cultures coming together. If you look at mid-60s, you got the bossa nova coming in from Brazil. You had so many different things. So there's so many drummers that were coming out of different places. And I wanted to know about all of them because I loved all the music, and at that particular time, the industry wasn't, now it's, what the first jazz record's 1917. So, we're looking at like, over 100 years. There's so much for students to learn now. But the people that got to me, I didn't even know a lot of times who I was going to be influenced by, because you could just go buy a recording, by a record that looked interesting. I think I mentioned last time, there was like a national food store, in Cary, Illinois, the town I was, grade school and high school. And, you'd go and they'd have records there, so you'd go buy a carton of eggs and some milk, and you'd buy a new record that looked interesting, like Cream, or Jimi Hendrix, or, so stuff was and all of it was completely new. So, I remember the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix I was like, I went to just a party, a school party, at some, guy's garage. I went with my girlfriend at the time, and he put on this Jimi Hendrix record, you know, on his Victrola. Remember this just thing, and it's
Sure,
got
yeah.
like it looks like a
The
suitcase with
speaker,
a
yep.
turntable in it.
Mhm.
And I started listening. I put my head in the turntable, and I listened to the entire thing, and then I turned it over. And I listened to the. I mean, I don't know, you know, I just left my girlfriend that day. I mean, I was just so mesmerized. And so I
Yeah.
didn't know who Mitch Mitchell was. I mean, now you could go back and you can look at, you know, you know, Mitch Mitchell, he played with Georgie Fame and the Flames. I mean, you know, he was around. There are different people that you can look at. They had a history. Or Ginger Baker, I told you, you know, Cream, you know, I looked and it says undoubtedly Europe's greatest drummer. So I bought that. Well, then you go back and then you can look at him playing with Graham Bond Organization,
Sure.
you know, so it's like later on. But when you're a kid, when you're younger, you know, you're just mesmerized by the sound, and it speaks to you or it doesn't at that particular time. And the music that always spoke to me was more, you know, it was technical in a way, but it wasn't the technique that I was interested in. It was more of like the music speaking to me. So like when you mention like, you know, Dave Weckl, you know, and Steve Gadd, you know, Billy Cobham, I love those guys, of course, but those weren't really my big influences, believe it or not. You know, I was coming more from a looser kind of way of playing, like Milford Graves, for instance, who just died on February 12th.
I heard about
You know,
that.
he, you know, so he was one of my influences, you know, him and Andrew Cyril. You know, Roy Haynes was a big influence on me. So, you know, it came from more of an improvisational quality than sort of a technique coming out of the rudiments kind of thing. And that if I play the way I play, I can play all the rudiments, of course, and especially being a, you know, a teacher, I've got to know that stuff.
Right.
But that's not what I think of when I play. You know, I'm thinking about talking through the instruments, and I'm talking about making sentences. You know, I'm talking about telling a story. You know, I'm not showing off like what I had practiced for, you know, that particular week. You know, and that doesn't mean that I don't teach some of that. I mean, you know, if you work on linear drumming, you know, I love linear drumming, you know, that's not it, but linear drumming's been around. Roy Haynes was like one of the first linear drummers, you know, and I'm sure he didn't even think of it as linear drumming when he was
went
playing.
from feel. Yeah,
he just, it was just completely just, you know, his way of looking at the music and reacting with the chops that he had. Because, you know, I remember having not an argument one time with Barrett Deems, you know. So Barrett Deems, you remember him, okay? The world's fastest drummer. He was amazing.
I never saw him. A friend of mine here actually played with him when this kid was Tommy Bridges, trumpet player, played with Barrett when he was like 14, 15, 16. I mean, he worked regularly with him. So that's where I got introduced back in the 70s. So yes, I'm sorry I interrupted, but yes, right.
Well, yeah. So you know, I told you that's one way I broke in the scene is I went down to Marina Towers and sat in with his band on an afternoon, and he liked what I was doing. And then he started, you know, having me sub for him. But I remember one time, you know, we were talking about Roy Haynes, and I said, yeah, you know, Roy Haynes has great chops. And he goes, no, he doesn't. And he actually got mad. You know, he says he's a great drummer. He's got fantastic ideas and fantastic time, but, you know, great chops is Buddy Rich. You know, that's the way he was, because he's coming out of that swing era.
Yeah.
He's thinking of chop. And, you know, then later on, you know, you see a Roy Haynes interview and he's going, he would have loved to have like those kind of chops, but he didn't. So he had to kind of figure out a way to actually express himself without having those chops. And I think that's, to me, that's what attracted me to people. And then again, you know, even just buying not only records off the shelves of bands I never heard, you know, because I vividly remember where I bought records. So, you know, and, you know, I go to Rose Records on Wabash Street in Chicago, and on the second floor, they'd have like blowouts, you know, so you'd go and you'd buy records, you know, for cheap that you'd never heard. Even cheaper. So, you know, and then you'd go home and you go, wow. And these weren't records that were necessarily promoted on, you know, as much as like popular records were, you know. And then even when you look at even popular records, you know, a lot of people had a hard time breaking through. I mean, English bands sometimes had a hard time until the British invasion breaking into the, you know, U.S. market. And, you know, there was a lot of funny stuff. Now I'm looking at Mike, he's going about, you know, talking about food and cat food by King Crimson. So like one of my big influences would be Michael Giles, you know, I mean, and he's still around, but I mean, he would have been And I remember where I bought the record. I remember the first time listening to that record, and what I liked about him was the unpredictability of his phrasing. So he had, technique to be able to express himself beautifully, but it wasn't like, technique that, everyone wants to go like, how was that broken up? How did you do that? I mean, it was just music, it was just like a brilliant statement. So, that's the way I look at it.
It's interesting. When I started out, my first big influence, just because my dad brought home Buddy Rich records, the Big Swing Face, and the other one was recorded the same night. It had the West Side Story on it when I was, I think, maybe 6.
Oh, Swing a New Big Band.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and so I wore those things out, and of course he had a lot of Kenton records and Woody Herman, and then Maynard, some of the '60s Maynard stuff with Tony Gonzalico. That guy's a great player, and then of course a lot of those bands started to go more. Might have been producers, the contracts they had into like playing like, and no offense to anyone at all, but Chameleon or a Beatles song, or because they're trying to sell more copies, so it became more commercial, which is fine. But I was totally into technique, and then of course in 7th grade, my English teacher said you got to check out Billy Cobham. Love you, Billy, but it was technique, it was chops, and although maybe linear in that way too.
But he had a sound too. I mean, I love Billy's playing. His crispness and his attitude, and his execution of the technique that he had was totally. So,
totally. And then I was 17 before I discovered Tony Williams.
Oh wow!
And then I started working backwards, and like these guys were playing like Jack DeJohnette. Well, there's a guy for you, right?
Yeah.
The cymbals, and somehow early on I heard of John Christensen.
Yeah, I can tell you the story about that.
Oh, I'd love to hear that. John Christensen with Jarrett and Garbarek and Polly. And like I started getting into cymbals and statements more than chops.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that a lot. And I still do.
Yeah. Well, Jan Christensen, I mean, for one thing, he and I think Jan Garbarek were at the first gig I did with Pat Metheny in Oslo. I remember that. Wow. But that's a funny story how I first got hip to him, because again, going back to Earwax Control, Gordon James, who was the keyboard player, went to a Kmart in Elgin, Illinois, and bought this record. He bought like, I think maybe 5 of these, because they were like 23 cents a piece, of this album called The Esoteric Circle. Wow. Which had Jan Christensen and Jan Garbarek, really? Errol Anderson, who I've since played with, and Terry Ripto. And when we put the record on, Jeff Check goes, "Wow, that drummer sounds just like you." Isn't that funny?
Yeah, but you know what?
So I was kind of playing, I mean, sort of, I guess, with that European kind of sensibility before I even heard, ECM, because this was on Flying Dutchman Records,
Oh yeah, I remember them.
Yeah. So that was, so a lot of times, I mean, it's like you find kindred spirits, from other places, you go like, wow, we're thinking very similar, or wow, I never met you before, but how did you know that, and so it was a real natural kind of thing. So I was coming out of that more melodic kind of way of playing too. And Jan was great. I mean, great drummer. He just died recently too, which is terrible,
Yeah, like a year ago, maybe. Or two
but check out The Esoteric Circle. That's a great record. That out. Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy. Well, anything that he was on, pretty much, I enjoy. A lot of the ECM stuff from the '70s and '80s, and but even after that, later on, it seemed like he really went into a little bit more experimentation with.
Yeah, he wanted to start playing free a lot. A lot of drummers kind of end up doing that.
Yeah, with the the stick. I have a cymbal here, but using the stick like a lot of us do. Pretend this is a cymbal.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
The edge like that.
I know.
But different sounds, different directions, and this and that, and then different ones, and the rims of the drums, and then the rim with the head, kind of a rim shot, really light. But he got real experimental, and it's very interesting to watch him too. And this is only just a few years ago. Relatively recent video, and you know, he was certainly a pioneer, and but you're a pioneer too because you're already doing that before you heard of him.
Yeah,
That's pretty
and
cool.
I mean, so who was first? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what was the first time we did that? Who knows, But then
Yeah.
you look like drummer like Tony Oxley, like amazing drummer. There's a great record called Extrapolation by John McLaughlin that's fantastic. And
I
then,
have that.
he
Yeah.
he played a lot, like, he's even on a thing with Bill Evans, the piano player, and did a lot of stuff at Ronnie Scott's, but then later on he got to be playing free. Go on YouTube and look at stuff, duos with like, Derek Bailey and stuff, because I think a lot of times, you play so much music. And I mean, in fact, Derek Bailey, if memory serves me correctly, he was doing, he was just a, guitar player. And then he realized that he wasn't playing music, he was working music. And that to play music, you should feel like you're a kid in a sandbox, just experimenting around, instead of just kind of being a professional playing, stuff the same way all the time. And I mean, that doesn't mean that that's right or wrong, but I kind of like doing both, and sometimes if you do both, people don't necessarily believe, that you're one or the other. It's almost like, you're trying to walk a fine line. So, you're not completely experimental. So, maybe you're not really into the experimental music. Or if you play rock, well, you're not really a jazz player if you're playing rock. I mean, that used to be that kind of thing too. It's almost like you're being a musical, like chameleon was almost like being a musical trader, which was really weird,
Yeah, that happened to a lot of people too, where you're labeled a certain way, and if you stray from that, then your peers within that label oftentimes just, okay, that's it. No.
Well, I'm labeled. I mean, like the way you think of me is probably mostly people would think of me as with Pat, because we sold millions of records. And that's not the way I think of me all the time. That's like maybe 20% of me, because that was the me that worked for that music. And I love playing that way. But, the real experimental way, the sort of dangerous way, that wasn't necessarily utilized all the time, which was fine because you have to serve the music. You can't, it's just like when you serve cuisine, you can't serve everything all at one time. You have to pick what you're going to have for your appetizer and for your soup and for your, main course or whatever your entrees. You can't just bring 30,000 entrees on there and say, let's eat them all the time. You'll be like Mr. Creosote from The Meaning of Life.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's funny. So a couple of days ago, I was listening to a Metheny thing. We're watching it on YouTube. I love that I have this Chromecast on my TV now. Finally, I figured out how to use it so I can like watch on the big screen from my phone. And I don't know where it was. I don't know what year. All I know is I did one of those swipes to, okay, let's stop here and see what they're doing. It is the very, very beginning of a tune, which reminds me of something else I want to ask you. I can think of the head, but there's no way I could possibly sing it. But then after the head sounds very experimental, and I loved it because Pat's into that to a degree, at least, right?
So oh yeah, sure.
There is no time, basically.
Yeah.
Really,
you're not talking about 0 Tolerance for Silence, are you? Or are you talking about The Sign of Four? Which one is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you played it for me, I could identify it, but I'm terrible with titles too, really bad. So that was cool. Then I'm listening to 8x12.
Yeah, right.
Head, and you got the rest, and then you got the head. And you know what? It was just, to me, that's shapes and colors. I hear shapes. I see colors. I almost feel like I hear colors, but if I see shapes in that between the interaction with you and everybody, I love that. And I have a question that's off topic, but when I saw you here one time, I saw you many times, with this one particular time, maybe around 93-ish. The beginning of the show opened with, I'm pretty sure most of you playing some instrument coming from the back of the auditorium.
Oh yeah, that was Forward March. Right. That was Forward March. Yeah.
That was kind of cool. I enjoyed that.
Well, it definitely sets up kind of a cool vibe for the rest of the concert,
Yeah. It wasn't because every time I'd seen you before that, or Pat before that, it was Phase Dance, which it's great.
Right. Phase Dance for for a number of years still with me was still the second tune. We would
Oh,
go
okay.
from the forward march into face dance. Then after a while, it went to, I think the first tune became Have You Heard?
Yeah, okay.
Because
Yeah.
as Pat added more, songs to the repertoire, we could only go so long, otherwise we'd be playing like 8-hour concerts.
And they were already about 3 hours anyways.
Yeah, they were.
They always said you get your money's worth with Pat Metheny, right?
Yeah, definitely. You did, for sure.
No, that was beautiful though. So I'd love to go back though and touch on this subject we were talking about before we went live. By the way, people, if you have any questions, we have more people on Facebook here live. So if you have questions for Paul Wertico, please type them in the comments. I'm monitoring the feed on the phone.
Good.
And if Michael's been typing, he knows what to do. If anyone comes in on Zoom, well, I'll address that if I see anybody. But if you have comments, questions, please comment in the comments below the video here on Facebook. Paul and I earlier were talking about, well, actually in the first interview, we started to talk a little bit about shapes and colors.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to turn it over to you with that, because how do you see that? When you say the word shapes and colors, what does it mean to you? It's a loaded question, but
well, for one thing, if you think just kind of a general statement, if I think of Elvin, I think of circular, like rolling kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If I think of like Roy Haynes, I think of more angular.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I remember hearing, Jack DeJohnette talk about like the way he thought of time is like in a dryer, like the clothes go up and then they fall down and they go up and then they fall down, So if you start thinking of like, do you want the music to flow smoothly and roundly and very gently, or do you want to think of like, abrupt interruptions, that would be one of the things, I don't necessarily think of colors. I mean, I think of emotions for sure, like if I want to be, aggressive, or if I want to, be funny or whatever. But to me, the music, a lot of different music it makes people feel a different way. And so something that I would play it for a friend or something, and they might like it, or they might go, I don't hear this at all. Why are you attracted to this? And also, in the old days, I mean, music was about dance, the whole delayed backbeat, about that with Al Jackson Jr. from the Stax, yes. Like in the midnight hour, where that came from, the delayed backbeat? It came from a dance.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. It came from a dance. I think it was in New York. I think Jerry Wexler or somebody said something where people were dancing and their arms went down later on the 2 and 4. So, wow. Al Jackson Jr. had to kind of interpret like what beat would work with that dance,
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
cool. So you start looking at, not only like shapes and sounds, but just movements in general. Yeah. Are you herky jerky? I always tell kids, if you're going to play and you want to be like, if you're going to crash on the 1, on rock, it's okay to crash on 1 because you're marking like, 2 bars or 4 bars, crash, boom, 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 bottom, crash. Now, if you do that in jazz, it's like equivalent to walking and then putting both feet down, and then you got to start all over again. So instead of like crash, ding, a ding, ding, a crash, no, you crash on like the and of 4 or something. So you got, crash, ding, a ding, doom, crash, ding, a ding. So you start thinking of that as forward motion, as opposed to like limiting the forward motion and kind of a spike in it and stopping, and then you have to start all over again. So those would be shapes, and again, there's no right or wrong. I mean, there's more of appropriate sometimes for certain types of music, and things might work better than others, and all of them are just an option. So the more open-minded you are, and the more, I guess, knowledgeable you are, the more options you have to make those decisions. And they're not necessarily conscious decisions all the time. Sometimes they might be, but it's more about everything that's in you just tells you as you're doing it what is right, as far, and that's how it works. Does that help answer that question?
Totally. Absolutely. I never thought of it. Now it makes sense when you think about when you said, let's say you have Elvin with rolling versus Roy with angular. I totally get that.
Yeah.
So you got a circle versus a triangle, or a geometry different with angles in it.
Yeah.
It could
Or
be a
like an
lot of,
egg shape, an oblong, like
yeah,
Brazilian,
it could be a lot
you
of
know.
different shapes. Yeah,
Right.
but not round. Uh, that totally makes sense to me. I appreciate that. What about when you're doing something that's, let's say, well, like 8x12
Okay.
or something like that? You got the head, you got the rest, and then the head
Yeah.
at the end. You restate the theme one more time, but for, I guess, without hopefully I articulate this right, but something with no time, I think is really cool because it's more of like a synaptical interaction, it seems, and you're going for tones, feels, feels and tones, maybe. I mean, when I think of what I would do, because I have so many different ideas now after talking with you the last time and kind of preparing myself to maybe
Yeah.
actually pick up a pair of sticks again.
Huh.
It'll be different than the last time, man. And it ain't gonna
Good.
be like your typical, no offense. It might be typical jazz and R&B at some point, but not at first, because I got tired of that. That's why I stopped playing it. So
Yeah.
I mean, I love autumn leaves, but I like them on the trees. So I mean, I love a lot of the standards, but I just don't want to play them anymore. And if I do, it ain't gonna be with time.
Well, yeah, and you can play them very out, you know. I
Yeah,
mean, you have bands like, Michel Pilk Trio, Jean-Michel Pilk, who is
oh, I
like
don't
this
know
great
that
piano
one.
player. And if you go on, sometimes he's got Ari Honig playing drums. Now
Oh, right.
they'll do a lot of like rhythmic modulations.
Mm-hmm.
So like with 8 by 12, we're not even dealing with necessarily a straight pulse that we're going to do rhythmic modulations. Like all of a sudden now we're going to subdivide 7/4. No, we're just basically just flowing. So it's an organic thing as opposed to sort of sometimes, like an inorganic where it's a mathematical subdivision. Both are great.
Mm-hmm.
They're just two different ways of kind of looking at music. And, you know, um, there's nothing wrong with, I mean, you can take a standard and you can stretch it out, I mean, as long as everyone knows where the harmonic, there's a harmonic rhythm usually in time with the numbered bars, but you
Mm-hmm.
can stretch that out. I mean, you can play games with that, but everyone's got to kind of know that they can do that, and
Yeah.
not everyone's comfortable with it. Not everybody, sometimes people are suspicious that like that's not really good stuff because like, oh well, they're not really playing the changes, that I kind of look at it, well, you can kind of tell if someone's just BSing their way through something.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. I remember a concert I went to 8, 9 years ago, Eastman Theaters, Herbie Hancock with Vinny and maybe James Jean. I don't know. But what was really interesting about that is I'd never seen Vinny play like that before. And when I say that, I mean it, of course, as a compliment because
Yeah, he's great.
he's an incredible musician and drummer. But he played that night in a way that I never, uh, heard him do. Well, not live, anyways. And they were like 5 minutes at least into Dolphin Dance,
Mm.
kind of freestyle. Before I finally figured out it was Dolphin Dance, because like
Yeah.
Herbie's like a genius with coming through the back door with these things, and then eventually stating like 3 notes of the head. I'm like, holy crap, this is Dolphin Dance. And then they, after like 15 minutes and 20 minutes, that it was a long tune, but it wasn't necessarily free of time, but there was this huge amount of elasticity in it. And I'd
Yeah.
never seen Vinny flow like that before.
Oh, he can
'Cause
definitely, I mean, he's really one
physical
of my
motion.
favorite. I
Yeah.
mean, just as far as he can play anything and play it to make the music succeed, whether it's just a backbeat, or
Yeah.
whether it's just some ridiculous thing in an odd
Yeah.
meter,
Right.
he can read anything. I mean, he's really, and for me, there's certain drummers that just don't touch me. Like they seem cold. I mean, Vinny is not one of those drummers. There's something about him that I
Yeah.
really feel like it's really coming from a deep place too.
Yeah, I think it is. And he just has that way. But that night, it was really cool to not just see him do it and hear him, but watch physically how he moved, because the flow, there was a
Well,
flow.
that's the physical thing is very important,
That
you know.
physical thing was so elemental, so much a part of the sound. How he was hitting the cymbals, it was almost like this circular motion, sort of,
Yeah,
you know, very
yeah,
flowing. But if I had a time exposure of his playing, I'd have this beautiful flow.
yeah.
It was really cool.
Well, it's like painting pictures, you know. And I mean, if you look at, you know, the rudiments, you know, you have the militaristic way of playing the rudiments, you know, which is very up and down, you know, very precise. And then you've got the tap dancing, soft shoe
Mhm.
way of playing the rudiments, you know. So Baby Dodds, like the first really, you know, great jazz drummer, you know, he was coming across as almost a tap dancer, you know.
Mm.
So it's a different way of applying a certain thing. And you know, again, you know, everything should really make you want to dance, and you don't necessarily have to dance in time, you know. I mean, you can dance in time, but you know, you can flow. I mean, you know, sometimes you think of a Grateful Dead concert, everyone's spaced out and flowing like that, and you kind of, it seems funny, but in some ways, if that's what's moving you to feel like that, what's wrong with that? You know, that's you know, your way of moving the air, and their bodies are interpreting, you know, that their nervous system and everything is interpreting that music that way, which is making their bodies want to move that way. That's fine, you know. And that's the way it is when you play, you know. Because, you know, there's been people that say, oh, you know, only play with your wrist and your fingers, you know, don't use extra arm movements.
Oh,
And then you
yeah.
get, you know, then you watch Dijonette, you know. I mean, so it's like, come on, you know, whatever works. You know, you watch Paul Motion, he looks like you know, he used to look like a child that, you know, just kind of hit the drums
Yeah,
later on. But it was
I love
amazing
it.
stuff. Yeah, the stuff that he came up with. So it just, you know, it's basically, I think, in our lifetimes, finding what works for us and believing in what we're doing, and just, you know, other people can take it or leave it, but we, you know, we believe that what we're doing is actually real. That's the way I kind of look at it.
Yeah, you know, so back in when I was in school 40 years ago for music, of course I was 20, so yeah, I'm a very late bloomer, Paul, but I'm starting to understand some shit now.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I remember
Okay.
back then it was a certain way of doing rudiments at that school. They just wanted
Right.
they want a certain way of, you know, whatever technique, I forget, it was Moeller or whatever on marimba and all this. It's fine. It's good to learn. And then, you know, in music theory class or piano minor with all the Baroque stuff and the Bach etudes and this and that, there no
Mhm.
parallel fifths. So if you're gonna you hear, so if you're reading the music, you're gonna just do what it does. But if you're writing something out as an experiment, a Baroque experiment, no parallel fifths. Or like Steve Hunt, the keyboard players, I love parallel fifths. I mean, but then if you look at Jack DeJohnette, this is dialing me back around to use of limbs, and let's say even in some people's eyes, and not a judgment, just I think it's an observation of what would probably be considered very improper technique. But who decided what technique should be, what's right and wrong? And I think that especially if you're making a career out of this, like you were saying,
well,
fingers, wrist, man, look at
well
Jack. I was
let,
talking with Dennis Chambers about, he was talking yesterday about how he said, oh man, Jack DeJohnette, you know, how the hell does he bounce off the drums and cymbals like that? And it's like, you know, he's going to make it to where he needs to go because it's Jack. But
yeah.
it's an
Well,
amazing
let me,
way of this energy that flows out. And like, if I try to do it, I wouldn't be doing what he does because I'm not
yeah.
him. But it's really cool. That technique is Jack.
Well, let me tell you a story. Okay. So, you know, I think last time I talked about this student that drove up from Fayetteville, Arkansas, you
Oh yeah.
know, and yeah, and asked me if, you know, if he could take my lesson. And I said, sure. And then, you know, he had all these lessons with Elvin and all that stuff. I think I told you the Elvin story about the, you know, movies and stuff. Now, one of the other things that's so cool on one of the recordings he gave me is at one point, you know, he was studying with another teacher too in New York, I guess at the time, you know, mid 70s.
Mhm.
And this guy was more of a studio player and was trying to get him to play a certain way technically.
Mhm.
And so Elvin goes, what do you mean? And so the guy shows him on a floor time. He goes like, in other words, this, and he goes, you know, boom, bugga doom, da 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 da, or whatever on the floor time. And Elvin goes, oh, man, you just played it. He goes, that other teacher, he just wants you to play like he plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then Elvin goes on and he goes, man, there was one time, I think I was in Philadelphia and there was this band and the drummer was playing his ass off, man. He was playing his ass off. And I went to shake his hands and he didn't have any fingers on either hand, but he was playing his ass off. See,
Wow.
so if you look at it that way, as
Yeah.
opposed to like a teacher that maybe, if you're learning the Moeller technique, or if you're learning, a certain technique that you have to learn that technique to get good at that technique, then you have to learn the mechanics and stuff, right? Okay, nothing wrong with that if that's your mission. But when it comes to making music and getting the sound out of stuff,
yeah,
it's just a matter, and the more different techniques you have, if you're creative, you have more options. But I just heard something really interesting. There was a political thing I just heard where there was a guy that was he was like an understudy for one of the senators many years ago, this cool senator. And the senator really liked this guy. And at this one point, the guy goes, man, I don't know, all these understudies are all like, Yale and Harvard graduates. And the senator goes, listen, man, you can learn what they know, but they can't learn what you know. Think about that.
Yeah.
So
right.
you can practice technique, but how do you, to be able to think in your own way, because we are who we are. That's just sort of what makes us unique. And so, if you don't have the technique to be able to express what's in your head, that can be a problem. Just like with speed, like everybody wants to play fast, and there's nothing wrong with playing fast because that's energetic, frenetic, it gets people moving. Now that if you have extra chops that you don't need, that's like having headroom. So that means when you're playing a groove and you decide to go, you can pull it off because you've got those chops in, it's like when you're trying to pass on a 2-lane highway, if your car can go 90 miles per hour, but you don't go there. Unless all of a sudden there's a truck coming at you, you need that 90 miles per hour for those few seconds. That's what technique is allow you to do. Because if you don't have that extra gear, then you go around and then you slow down your fill, or it just, it sounds sloppy. So you need enough technique to express what you want to play. But, like there's so many great drummers. I mean, I think of Earl Young, the drummer, who Earl Young is, the guy that invented disco. I mean, he's the guy, he's the drummer and the singer with the Tramps. So he's on all those Philadelphia records.
Okay.
If you listen to like the Spinners, I mean, he's like a human metronome. Go look at Earl Young. Now the guy, when he plays, he's just got a groove, and the stuff is really as simple can be, but it feels amazing. I can't imagine Earl Young trying to play, because it would have ruined the tracks that he made famous. So so again, and look, and if you go on, like if we're Facebook friends, but if you go on, he's made so much money. I mean, he's got pictures of his cars and walls of, of like gold and platinum. I mean, the guy is like done so much. And so many people don't know who he is. And that happens a lot with studio players. He's more than a studio player. Like I said, the band The Tramps, he's also a singer in The Tramps.
Oh, wow.
But, when you think of like, Hal Blaine, for instance, Hal Blaine could play big band sort of, but like, you don't think of him ever playing anything fast. It was just real creative, really, clever in meaning clever good, like a really like way of getting something to stick out that normally would not stick out, but that's also so important that it actually is as important as the melody and the lyrics of the song. That's what you want to be able to do.
What about just made me think of something. I might be way off base, but what about Mel Lewis? I mean, I saw him a couple times. Didn't seem
Mel
like
Lewis, of course.
That didn't seem like a chops monster, but yet the feeling I got from him was, especially the cymbals, man. Holy crap,
Yeah. And I mean, his thing, like, he just had a great feel. And those episodes where he's being interviewed, all those episodes online where
nope. We got to check him out though.
Oh my God. There's like 23 hours. There's like 23 hours crap. Where he was interviewed.
Cool. Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's interviewed, and it goes all the way from Baby Dodds all the way to Elvin. So they'll play things, and then he'll comment on stuff. So like he'll
Jesus.
talk about like the Baby Dodds drum solo. He goes, see, he said, okay, for one thing, that's not drumming, that's dancing, that's tap dancing.
Oh
He
man,
said,
really?
and he'll go and listen to that bass drum, that boom, boom, boom. It's perfect. He said, I know kids now, they can't play the bass drum. They just use it for accents and stuff. He's very opinionated. So he'll talk about certain things. But man, you have to look that up. Oh
Oh,
my
I
God.
definitely do that. Yeah.
Oh, those are amazing.
I
And
really like
part of
that guy. Yeah, him and Shelly Mann, another one with
well, let me tell you
massive
Shelly
amounts of
Mann's
field.
story.
Yeah,
Let me
sure.
tell you
I'd love
Shelly
to hear
Mann's
it.
story.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I knew Shelly Mann's things from like 78s of the Kenton.
Sure.
My,
Yeah,
my
me too.
parents had that. So, artistry
Me
and
too.
rhythm and stuff. So I remember, I went to see Shelly the first time at the Jazz Showcase when it was on Rush Street at the Happy Medium. It was with the LA Four. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And, it was really good. Really, I loved it and everything. So then several years later, he was coming and he was going to play the Jazz Showcase when I was at the Blackstone.
Oh yeah.
So I decided to go there. And Dave Dirge, remember you asking me about Dave Dirge?
Yep.
So Dave Dirge was another great drummer. He lived, like a couple doors north of me. So we decided to go. We went together. So we go and we heard the first set. It's a trio. It's Monty Budwig and I think Russ Freeman and Shelly Mann. So we start talking to Shelly on the break, and he goes, "Well, I'm going to go eat. You guys want to come with me?" And was like, "Sure." So we go with him to Miller's Steakhouse on Wabash. He buys us both steak dinners.
Really?
Yes,
Man.
he didn't even know who we were. He buys us steak dinners. Then we go back and hear the second set. So then dig this. So the next day he was going to give a clinic at downtown somewhere. And it was like at 9 a.m. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go, but I went, I'm going to go anyway. It's like, I got to check this out. So I go and it's really good. It was, I was glad I went. So literally later on, the next time I'm doing a radio show on WBEZ, I'm being interviewed by Barry Winograd. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I hear, and this is for Shelly Mann, who died today. And I was, oh my God. So if I hadn't gone and seen him, I would, so that's the thing I say a lot of times too. You got to see everybody because you never know when they're not going to be here anymore. Because it's always like, I'll go hear him next time kind of thing,
That's so
and
true,
sometimes
man.
there's no other next time.
Yeah, I mean, I had that with Michael Brecker. Even though I'd seen him a few times, I was debating going to Boston with and one of my best friends lives near there. So we did. We went to see Herbie, Terry Lynn, Scott Colley, Roy Hargrove, and Michael Brecker. It was Michael's last tour.
Wow.
As I knew it would be. And I'm so glad I went because it was a really special combination of players I'd never seen together before. And I loved Michael, and he was a big influence on me musically. Just incredible. Man, Shelly Mann, holy crap. So he must have passed away like in Chicago?
No, he passed away. He had a ranch. He was one of those guys that not only was an amazing drummer and percussionist, but he was a smart guy. So he moves to LA, becomes a studio. So he's on everything,
Okay, yeah.
And even if you watch, some of the old black and white Peter Gunn and stuff, you'll see Shelly Mann playing on
really?
the set.
And
so he had a ranch. Yeah, but he died 64, he died young.
Yeah, he was young.
Yeah, so the thing is, like cats, we think we're all going to be around forever. And, when the time is there, it's, so I'm glad I saw who I got to see.
I mean, I saw Dexter one time at the Jazz Showcase, and he lived a few more years, but I wasn't in a place here in Syracuse when I moved back. He's not going to come to Syracuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some people I saw out in Chicago, and of course I would go to New York City a lot too. It's like 4 hours away, but and then look at the past year with some great people, musicians and otherwise who passed away. COVID takes a healthy person and it kills them because of the complications. I mean, it's real, and that's why I'm grateful that I'm still although I suffer this memory crap. It'll go
Wow.
away, and I'm doing okay. You know, I'm one of the lucky ones, man. I'm not having heart problems. I never had a respiratory
Wow.
issue. I just had central nervous system issues, but they're diminishing. So, but
Well,
you
like I
don't
said,
know.
but
Like you say, you
my
don't.
wife and I just got our second dose
Yeah,
on
I'm glad.
Wednesday, you know,
I'm
and
glad.
then that next day we both felt it. It was like flucin, you know, like
Yeah,
body aches, headache, chills,
sure.
kind of fatigue. And we were thinking, you know, because we expected that, because we know not everybody gets that second dose symptoms, but we were reminded, like, oh my God, if this is just a little thing of what COVID would be like,
Yeah,
holy moly, you know, it'd be horrible.
yeah, yeah. So just touching on Shelley again, I have quite a bit of vinyl in my collection
Mhm.
of him. I think a couple things are on that mainstream record label. Remember them
Yeah,
from like
sure.
60s and early 70s, maybe. And it's all small group stuff. A couple things were recorded at Shelley's Manhole, which
Yeah.
I guess he had a club there. Actually, so Gary, you know Gary Hobbs, right?
Yeah.
Do you personally know Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He such
Great
a nice
drummer.
guy. Great drummer, really great educator, nice guy, super nice guy. We were talking about Shelley too. He has one of Shelley's old drum sets in the room that he was interviewing from.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Wow.
so that was kind of, yeah, that's really special to me, the Shelley connection, just because I really enjoy listening to Shelley. And my dad had gotten to see Shelley a few times. And my dad, you know, he had a knack for just knowing or feeling really good stuff, you know, like the real deal kind of players. And they didn't have to be all chops like some people are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But,
Well,
you know, I'm glad.
go, you know, to the Mel Lewis. There were interviews with Lauren Schoenberg, you know,
Okay.
the sax player, had this, and he even talks about, you know, they'll talk about different drummers, like I said, and he talks about Shelly Man too. There's a really, I won't even go into it. There's a really interesting story about a China cymbal on that. Really interesting.
Really?
Like,
Okay.
yeah, it'll blow your mind.
On the Mel Lewis thing. So,
Yeah.
so is that on YouTube, do you think?
Some of it's on YouTube, yeah. So
Okay.
Lauren Schoenberg.
I'll Google it. Um, so we were talking earlier too. Oh, there's one thing I
Were
wanted
there
to
any
say.
questions? I mean, are there
Yeah,
people out there?
well, I don't have questions on Facebook. Michael
Huh.
Mallow mentioned something though about Pat Metheny, unnamed
Oh,
song.
on scrap metal, I see. Yeah.
Scrap metal. Yeah, I think I remember that. I think I saw you guys when it didn't have a name
Yeah.
yet.
Oh, is that true? Yeah.
Hmm.
Because I think there was Off Ramp was before that, and I think when I first joined the band, that we used to play Off Ramp, which was like, you know, the more out tune, and which had a drum solo, and then there was a new tune called Scrap Metal.
Yes. Let me just check on Facebook here, see what we got going on. No, we have a bunch of people watching though. So if anyone
Hi,
has questions
everyone.
though, if any you have questions for Paul, just type them in the comments here below the
Yeah.
video and start asking away. So, you know, when you first tuned in before we went live, I heard some
Hmm.
music in the background that you were
Oh,
playing.
wow. Right.
Is there anything you want to talk about in that regard?
I don't know. I mean, I
Like
guess
unreleased stuff
um,
or stuff we don't know about? Because that whatever that
well,
was
you know, like we were
burning.
talking about, like different sides. Well, let me play you. I just play parts of like something I'm thinking of releasing. It's you know, there's like 3 or 4 nights with my quintet and sextet with Lyle.
Hmm.
Um, let me play you. Am I
Lyle
a
Mays.
co-host?
Lyle Mays, you're talking?
Lyle Mays. You have to make me a co-host here.
Oh, I'm going to turn it over to you as a host.
No, you can just make me co-host. It works that way.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Oh, you just to the right where underneath the camera where it says
Oh,
more, go down,
make
co-host.
change from. I don't have a co-host thing, but I'm going to just make you a host.
No, you should. You've got to. It says rename and then,
Oh, is that what that is?
yeah.
Rename. Okay.
Well, no, it
No.
should. Wow, that's weird that you don't have that. Usually it says co-host.
No, it's okay. You can. It's fine. I'm just going to make you a host right now. Yep.
Okay, let me
So
see.
you
Let me
were.
see if I can share anything.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
now I
yeah.
can share something.
Okay, good.
All right. Yeah, let me play you, like, for instance, like, I'll play the head of this tune. This is Eric Hochberg's this great bass player. He was in the Paul Wertico Trio as well. So let me just play the head of the song. Then you can kind of hear Lyle's solo over it. And you can kind of hear how we're burning. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing, but here's the song.
Okay, cool.
So there was the form. So I get to, let's see.
Yeah.
So
Smoking.
yeah, wait till you see where it goes. Play another minute or two.
Yeah. Sounds great, man. Lyle's burning.
Oh man.
You're burning. Yeah. Whoa. Whoa.
So see what I'm talking about?
That's a beautiful build and release.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the kind of stuff, and people don't know. I mean, they don't know a lot of times that this was like the norm for the way we played back then. You know what I mean?
So when was that?
It was like 92, 93. I don't remember exactly which one that was from. I think that was from 90. Oh, when was that? Let me see. It was from, I think it was 92, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Because I
no, 93. It was 93. Yeah. So, I mean,
Mhm.
and I mean, you know, you want me like here, check out this for a second. Let me just play you this. Tell me if you can hear this. This is, I just play a second of this.
Sure.
This is, I'll tell you a funny story about this. Hold on.
I hadn't heard Lyle play like that before.
No. Well, I mean, that's what happens sometimes.
Well, what happened with Lyle in the end?
Can you tell this?
It's hard to hear.
Should I share that? Hold on.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay.
It's that's hard to hear. It's somehow muted down.
Okay.
What happened to Lyle in the end? I mean, when he passed, what?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go into that. It's just, you know, getting sick.
Bad, man. He was young too.
Yeah.
60s.
Tell me if you can hear. Tell me if you can hear this.
Sure.
Come on. I was just playing it. Let's see. How's this?
Great. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's 13 minutes long. And so what that is, there's a sax player named Charles Gale, who is from New York. Okay. So a funny thing about getting miscast. Okay. So when I got the gig with Pat, you know, a lot of people were like, you know, wow, you know, why did Pat hire Paul? Paul's like an, you know, out drummer. Okay. So then when Charles Gale comes to town, he hires me and Harrison Bankhead on bass. And people are going, why did Charles Gale get Paul? He's like plays with Pat Metheny.
Yeah.
So it was like a complete 180, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I see what you mean about being miscast though. But that's really cool, man. No, is that released? The Charles Gale?
No, that one's not released. I mean, that was just a tape of that someone gave me, you know. But I mean, if you really want to hear, like, let me play you something that has been released.
Okay.
So Howard Levy, you know, he's the great harmonica player.
Yep.
So we had a band. You were talking about Dave Dirge earlier too. So we had a band called the NBV, No Bad Vibes Quintet. And so he finally found the tape of this. I remember going in the studio one night and there were we recorded 3 tunes, all first takes. And I won't play the whole thing because it's long, but I just want to play you the way we played. I can play you either, let's see. I can play a swing. I'll play a little swing and I'll play you a little bit of the, of like more of a sombish thing. So this tune's called 22 Bars. Okay. So what happened here? Where did it just go? Sorry.
No problem.
That was weird. I hate when stuff goes south like this. Okay. So anyway, we can keep talking. Oh, okay. I'm going to pull it up. I can see it now. So anyway, so this is the way we play, you know, and it's so great to have documentation about all this stuff. So let me go past. So this is, I'll get to the swing. Can you hear this? Okay.
Yep. That's good.
No.
Yep.
So that's the test. So let me get this, like this next. Like this here. So this is 22 bars long. I'll get to the stack solo. Sorry. We can hear the form. Beginning of the form.
Yep. Playing center.
Steve Eisen. We were so the way we're playing is so dangerous.
I love it.
So here, I'll just play a little bit of another tune. So this is just more like it
Sounds neat.
So that's the head. Play a little bit of the solo. Well, listen to the way we move on this. And it was such a cool rhythm section.
I love this. Great song.
Yeah. gotta keep it going. More chords.
Yeah, keep going.
That's the way
That's
we
so
play.
nice.
That's 1980.
No kidding, man.
Yeah. So, you know, I was talking to Howard about a lot of this. It's just that how we were on fire back then when we played. You know what I mean? Like everyone on Lincoln Avenue, we were just playing for keeps. There was no holding back. There was, wasn't safe swing at all. It was very like, okay, let's go for this stuff. And then we played in the studio like that too. That's a great record. So you can find that, how it's called, the NBV Quintet.
I got to check it out.
Yeah.
I will check it out. On that tune, and then the one before that too, you have this big open, I would say sound, but it's more of an open feeling to it.
Yeah.
Like in 3, for example, instead of the rolling triplet, it's more elastic than that, which personally I enjoy that a lot, because it does something to the feel that makes it unique. It makes it unique.
Well, we were, and you were talking about shapes. So I was thinking in terms of like statements, So Howard and I are playing off each other. We were always really tight when we played, even to this day. We did all this stuff with Ken Nordine. I mean, we've done so many music things together. Kelly Sill was the bass player on that, who I hadn't played that much with, And then there's a trumpet player named Dave Urban that died a few years ago, and Steve Eisen on sax, who's incredible, So Steve is actually on some of the stuff I played, the stuff with Lyle too. I would use him because Steve's a great sax player and conga player. But, it was more about just different ideas and kind of changing, it's almost like you have a painting and then you're changing the frame around it. It's almost, that's what we were kind of doing. So the soloist is soloing, and instead of just playing time and having a nice frame, we're changing the colors and the shapes of the frame and everything to give the soloist like a different, it makes you hear the soloist differently, because sometimes it's swinging hard normally, and then all of a sudden it gets dangerous, and sometimes it almost gets like really dangerous, like, oh no. And then when you come out of it, it's like, because tension and release is so important in music,
It is, and I was thinking that same exact thought. And then the tenor player there, and one of the things he does that I'm a fan of, the harmonics and the false fingers and all that
multiphonics
stuff.
And all that. Yeah.
When the way that those are used is real important. It can be overused. It can be just not sound good, but he has a really nice way of stating that stuff. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. So, back in the day, we were also playing probably 14 gigs a week at least, I mean, we were playing. Everybody was playing, either with studio sessions and then gigs at night. And then, then you'd have like maybe 2 or 3 gigs on a Saturday and on a Sunday, and you just play and play and play and hang out, because we were young. So, you'd go play, and you'd go, there was a Mexican restaurant, El Presidente was the name of the Mexican restaurant on Lincoln Avenue. And everybody would go around like 2 or 3 in the morning after their gigs and hang out till sunup and talk about music. It was the way to kind of live the music as opposed to just study the music only,
Well, that I think that's really important too, and I remember doing that too. I mean,
yeah, of course. Well, I mean, everybody did back then if you were lucky.
As soon as I was able to, and I had a license, and I started work. I was working before that, but I had to get rides, and my mom would take me or whatever. But the later gigs started in around 1979, 80 for me. Get done at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and because here it's always been a 2 o'clock cutoff. So we never went to like 3 or 4. In other cities, we did once in a blue moon, but then we'd hit the Eggplant, which is a breakfast joint.
Oh yeah, right.
We just go and we spend a couple hours really just talking, and that was living the music. That was talking about it. That was coming up with ideas, rehashing what we had done, having fun, being silly, and kind of like some really strong connections were made that way, not just personally, but musically.
Yeah. And then, we were talking about the Jazz Showcase last time too. And, in the old days, there was 3 sets a night, Tuesday through Sunday. So, you had a 9, 11, and a 1. Whoa. So, by the time you get done with the last set, it's like, 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then, you play the Jazz Bulls, which was, you play from 9:30 to 4:30 in the morning,
Whoa.
And so the first set would have a lot of people, and then it would kind of thin out. And you're thinking, who's going to come to this last set? Well, all the musicians would come to the last set.
Yeah.
So you had the greatest time in your life, playing for the musicians. It was like really, and the music was new, I mean, like when ECM comes out, okay, wow, all of a sudden you're hearing, all the ECM artists, and they're playing this new kind of music, whether it was Gary Burton, I mean, we knew that, we knew Chick Corea and we knew Gary Burton before that, but they have all the stuff, or Steve Kuhn, all these great kind of musicians like that. And you go hear them and your mind is blown. There was all kind of new styles. I mean, at Roosevelt University, when I was head of jazz, I made the combo program genre specific. So, instead of a beginner to advanced combo, I had them like there was a swing, a bebop, a hard bop, an ECM combo, a Brazilian combo, an avant-garde combo. Now we also have like, it'll change, but like either a Stevie Wonder combo or, or like a Beatles. I mean, so we want people to learn all these different styles. Because, if you just play a bossa nova in your combo for one song, you're really not going to get into the Brazilian thing as much. But if you have to study with a Brazilian teacher for a whole semester of Brazilian music, you're going to get at least a better dive into what that music's about, which is really important,
Yeah, absolutely. This just made me think of something. Did you ever meet Manfred ECM?
Manfred Eicher?
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him twice. He came to 2 shows. He was nice,
Is he still around, isn't he? I think
as far as I know, yeah.
Stuff. How about I'm just curious. This is another after Bill Connors left Chick Corea.
Yeah.
More acoustic. And he did a lot on ECM. Did you ever work with Bill Connors?
No, I loved Bill Connors. No, I never got a chance to work with him.
Never saw him live either. He had left Chick's band just before I saw that band when I was like 13. And
I saw Chick's band right when Al joined as well.
Me too. Probably the same tour, same year. Yeah.
I saw him at Northern Illinois University. Oh, wow. Whereas where I saw Miles Davis there. I saw Larry Coryell's 11th House there.
Oh, no way. Really?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
So was Alphonse playing with 11th House before he was with Weather Report?
No, that was afterwards.
It was after. Okay.
Yeah, because I saw Alphonse Mazan with McCoy a couple times, which was mind blowing. That was just like, and so when I saw him with Larry, it was still good, but it was like he was almost trying to be like Billy Cobham. I mean, he had that big drum set and stuff. So I was a little bit like, I mean, it worked for the music, which is the most important thing, but it wasn't the Alphonse that I saw, with the 4-piece kit with the cymbals up like this.
He had a
stick. I mean, it was ferocious.
He and Eric Gravatt had the.
Well, I saw Eric Gravatt. I saw
Eric still has high cymbals. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I saw Eric Gravatt with Weather Report too. That was amazing.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's about 7, maybe 8 years ago. I was working with a radio station here, the university station, and I did a lot of interviews, musicians, and one of the people I talked with Alphonse, maybe 2 years before he passed away. And that was a fun interview because I say this with love, Alphonse, you were a character, and it was so much fun.
Yeah.
He was such a character. I loved, he was talking about his acting career, playing trumpet, playing keys, and he really did a lot of different things.
Well, that thing you do, there's remember that movie, That Thing You Do? There's where it's like about a rock band,
really,
that tries to like a young rock band, and at one point they go to a jazz club, and they're playing a song because what the drummer is really kind of jazz fanatic, and Alphonse Mazan is in the club. Playing and used one of his songs, so he actually made a good taste from his song being used in that movie.
See, that's good. I've heard of the movie, but I'm going to look it up.
Oh, that's a great movie. That's really good, really good.
Gee, that's cool. I don't know if you know the guitarist, a really good friend of mine, Jeff Richmond. Jeff is an LA guy. He's done a ton of studio stuff, and he's put out,
I know who he is,
30 CDs or so, and he plays with so many of my heroes like Vinny and Carlos Vega back in the day, and
Wow.
I mean everybody, right? So, and Haslip's on Las Kinsey, and just all these other people. So what was I just gonna say? I was gonna say, oh, he was friends with Alphonse, because Alphonse used to live really close to him in Granada Hills, which is
Oh,
just
wow.
northwest of LA, and Alfonso Johnson, Slim, as some people call him, still lives there.
Well, I just
So,
saw on Facebook today, Alfonso Johnson said he's going to be a grandfather.
oh, really?
Yeah, I just clicked on, I mean, yeah, I just saw that today.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check it out. I don't think we're friends on Facebook, but Alphonse and me, but I never saw him live. But he did a lot of stuff over the years. But
Oh, yeah.
Jeff and Alphonse are pretty tight, and Jeff and Alphonse. So basically, when I did my CD 2 years ago, which is more for a foundation that I started for Parkinson's, I play on 2 songs. But Jeff's on it. He co-produced with Scott Kinsey and Jimmy Haslip. But I have a lot of stories I heard from him about Slim. That's what Skip Haddon calls. You know Skip at Berkeley?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Skip refers to Alphonse Alfonso Johnson as Slim, and then Alphonse Mouzon. Just some really funny stories, my God. And the stories are so much fun to hear. Some can be told in public and some can't, of
I'm
a lot
sure.
of people.
Yeah.
The fun stuff.
Well,
So,
musicians, we, live interesting lives, memorable ones.
yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It's funny, not to, I don't want to like feature somebody else during featuring you, but Dennis Chambers was telling this really funny story. I won't go into it, about when Miles called him to do the gig with Miles. And that's just a story. It's an example of, it's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. Some of the stories are really interesting. Do you have any favorite stories, like things you can share? And I was thinking about it today when I take my dog for a ride in the car every day, because she
Yeah.
is so happy to be a co-pilot. And we're coming around the corner, and I saw something that reminded me of you. Just trying to think of what it was. Of course, I was going to talk to you today, and I say, I bet Paul's got at least 1,000 stories he could tell. So if I ask him to tell a story, how is he going to possibly choose one?
Well, I can tell, we were talking about breaking into scene,
Yeah.
So, when I was just kind of I was still living in Elgin, Illinois,
Mhm.
and I used to, come home after these gigs, like at 3 a.m, and I was so obsessed with playing. I had a corner house. Now, just imagine the summertime, you got your windows open. I would come home and I'd put on headphones and I'd start playing, practicing, like, with Jeff Beck or Frank Zappa or whatever. And, not thinking about like disturbing the neighbors at all.
Mhm.
And I remember one time my neighbor, knocked on my door the next day. He goes, man, didn't you hear me knocking at your door at 4:30 in the morning? And I said, no. He said, you're lucky, I was going to kill you. I was so obsessed with playing. And around that time, in Elgin, Jeff Check from Earwax Control and I, we weren't making any money at that time. We were just, trying to, get by, So we went to see, there was a band called Street Dancer, which was one of the big bands in Chicago at the time in the 70s. And they were good, I guess, but anyway, we went to hear them at Harry Hopes and Carey, where I had gone. This is the place I first heard Pat Metheny Group, and it's the first gig I did with Larry Coryell too, with the Simon and Bard Group. Well, anyway, so we go, and I'm spending like my last $5 to hear this band, because I want to see, like, who's really making it in Chicago. So they're playing, and I don't know what it was, but they weren't taking the gig seriously. They were kind of laughing on stage, but not laughing musically funny, but they were just almost like, we don't care if we're here or not. So at one point, Jeff gets up and goes, man, I'm just going to go out to the parking lot. You can come out when they're done. I said, fine. So anyway, they get done. And I've never done this in my life. This was like totally like from another place. I stand up and I say to the sax player, his name was Santez, and there's a stairway right next to the bandstand. And I go, he goes, we're going to take a break now. I go, thank God, you guys suck so bad, I can't believe it. So I'm walking out and we're having words. Okay. So anyway, about 6 months later, I'm still breaking in on the scene in Chicago, and I get a call, wakes me up, and it's from this guy. And I recognize his voice, this low voice like this. And so he wants me to do a gig with him. And so we talked for about a half hour, and we're getting along great. And I'm thinking, oh man, I wonder if he knows who I am. So finally, after I go, Santez, yeah, I'd love to do the gig, but man, I have to be honest with you, man. I saw you guys play, like about 6 months ago, and I stood up and I said, like, you guys suck. And he goes, you're right, we did that night. And then I started playing with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Ross Trout first heard about me. Ross Trout is who was with Metheny's kind of roommate in Miami. So I kind of broke in that scene by playing with Santez, who I had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, so you never know how that stuff's going to happen,
Isn't it? That's a good story. I mean, that, like you say, you never know. You could be here now, gone tomorrow, but you could be here now and say something and have an experience and then end up having a great experience down the road.
Yeah,
right?
and I would never tell somebody they suck. I mean, that's not my thing. But I spent my last $5 for this, and they were laughing, and it was like an insult, to me. It was like, man, if and I just stood up like as if someone took me over and like made me do that. It was so funny. But in the long run, it turned out to be the right thing, and I was right on top of it,
Yeah, that's really funny. Funny how it worked out, though. Worked out well.
Well, some of the people I play with, I mean, like Joe Daly. Remember, I turned down Pat Metheny's first call to play with Joe. Now, Joe was like, like 63 or something when I was like, 21 or 22. Now, I love Joe, and he was sort of a mentor to me. I'd go to his house afterwards till the sun up and listen to things that he would play me. But he was a tough guy. You could not, these guys, you could not mess around with these guys. And I remember one specific time I was playing with him, and the piano player that they were using that particular night, the regular piano player couldn't make it. This piano player was from Milwaukee. And he was a good piano player, but he brought down, they drove down together, him and this drummer. So at one point, the third set, because we used to play 3 sets, Joe goes, man, you mind if you let this guy sit in, and I said, no, that's fine. So, I'm standing there next to the stage, sitting next to the stage, and they start playing like Doxy, the tune, Sonny Rollins thing. And so they go, ba-doo, ba-doo, do, ba-doo, ba-doo, da, da, ba-da, da, 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 da. And it slowed down that fast. And really. Joe cuts off the band. This is like Full House at Orphans. Looks at the drummer on the microphone, says, you ain't making it, baby. And looks at me and says, come on back up.
Wow, man.
Now, could you imagine that drive back up to Milwaukee? But that's, you wouldn't probably do that now. You'd probably get in trouble for hurting someone's feelings.
Yeah,
but man, back in the day, guys did not mess around. I mean, they took that stuff as serious as possible. If you didn't respect the music, if you weren't, the famous Charlie Parker, Joe Jones story where Joe Jones threw the cymbal at him, Cats, that was, like it's the Valerie Wilmer wrote a book as serious as your life. I mean, it was serious for people,
Yeah, this is not quite the same thing, but I had an experience with a guy, but quite honestly, I think it was really his problem, not mine. But he was a great swinging hard B3 player, which I always loved that kind of a duo.
Oh yeah,
me and a B3 and me. We had it's funny, this is only like 10 years ago, and my time is pretty good. It's pretty solid. It's not the best, but it's pretty darn good. So anyways, it was $30 a gig is what I got paid. And that's because the club paid like 75. So it was stupid. And we get, a couple free drinks and get some kind of like snack or food or hot or whatever. And it was fine. It was an hour drive, but I didn't care because working with him was like being for me on a university because
Yeah,
he worked with
absolutely.
Rashid Ali, he'd worked with John Abercrombie, and he just had this.
What was his name?
Jeff Palmer.
Okay.
If you look up Jeff Palmer.
Okay. Because there's the University of Art Blakey. Everybody talks about being in the Jazz Messengers was like a university.
But he would occasionally, this might happen like once a month. I did 1 year every Friday night for 1 year, except for a couple Fridays that we missed. But he would count off. Sorry, Jeff. See, I love you, but we had words about this, and you're the greatest. But and you taught me a lot, so I'm just gonna say, he would count off, and he always counted off with force. Like the tempo was, you could feel what he wanted, right? And I'd start, whatever, maybe a funk thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, no. I'm gonna count it again. He stopped, right? Count it again. The same speed. Like, no. Faster. So count it faster then. It's like,
well,
so,
man,
in that case, it was a different thing. It wasn't like I was playing slower or slowing down, but it was that thing where I had a hard time figuring out what he meant by how he counted, because it was many times not how he counted that we ended up at a tempo at. So
interesting.
It was an interesting interpretation of things, but what a great experience, though.
Well, I went, man, at the Jazz Showcase one time at the Happy Medium, I saw Roy Haynes playing, and Eddie Jefferson was singing.
Wow.
And Eddie Jefferson counted off a tune, and then it changed tempos, I guess. And he stopped it, and he goes, Roy, it's here. And I'm thinking, man, he's telling this to Roy Haynes.
Yeah.
And actually, Roy was like, okay, man, Roy didn't seem, he's and one time, I think I don't know if it's ever been on videotape, but I saw Ray Charles do that. I think it was to Mickey Roker or something. Somebody on television one time called out the drummer on stage for something like that, but that's, that stuff happens sometimes. I mean, it's that old joke with singers, like, do you want me to count off the tempo too fast or too slow? It's like one of those kind of things.
I actually, there's a really funny story about Peter Erskine with a singer he toured with in 2004.
Steely Dan?
Diana
Krall?
Yeah. I guess I can probably say it because I brought this up with him a couple of years ago when we were talking online, and he said, "Oh, you mean Diana?" I said, "Yeah."
Huh.
So it was one of those situations. No, she didn't stop anybody, but it was interesting how he was saying, and by the way, nothing but respect for her, of course, but it was interesting because the interpretation of the time was different. And so he says to me, we went out to breakfast the next day. I was in Toronto. He invited me out and backstage passed all these tickets. It was very nice. And the next day we had breakfast. He said, "Did I look angry last night?" I said, No. He said, "Well, I was angry." So, well, you're the consummate professional. You didn't look angry. What happened? He says, "Well, that tune we count off. It's like ding, 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 ding." She said the night before I counted it off too fast. So he said, and oh no, counted off right, but sped up. Yeah. Now Peter has really good time. Like,
of course,
really good time, right? So he says he went to the sound guy, got a board, burned to a CD, recording of that tune, and then he went and he listened to the end, and then the middle, and then the beginning. It was the same. The problem was he took it to her and said, "By the way, I just want you to know we didn't speed up. You counted it too fast," because she counted it actually. Now I'm getting my story straight. She was pissed and she just walked away. So, anyways, the bottom line was there was a lot of tension. Well, there are certain musical situations where there can be tension, and hopefully it works out quickly. And tension of the bad kind, not musical tension, just tension. But the things that we can experience as musicians, I mean, there's countless different things that can happen. Getting stopped for the wrong reason, getting stopped for the right reason,
Yeah.
getting blamed for something you didn't do or something you did do. It's always a learning experience, though. There's so much we can learn from all that stuff.
Well, that was one of the nice things about the Metheny gig, is that a lot of it, was with sequencers.
Yeah.
So, you couldn't get yelled at for playing, too fast or too slow. I mean, it was the machine. It was going to be what it was, no matter what it is, because people's metabolisms are different some days, if you hadn't got any sleep or whatever, and so that sometimes happens too, where it's exactly the same tempo, but it feels faster or slower. I mean, one of the
That's
things I
right,
do before I go to bed and when I get up in the morning, and sometimes even in the middle day, I'll just put the metronome on my phone at 120, and I'll just do like 8 bars, 16ths. I'll do that every day. It's habitual, just so that 120 sounds like 120 to me.
I got it.
Isn't that interesting?
That's a good idea.
Like train yourself to have perfect pitch.
That does stuff to the brain too. It can bring you into this rhythm, brain rhythm.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Where Milford Graves, for instance, Milford Graves in that Full Mantis movie, you should see that if you have Amazon Prime. There's a movie called, where he says, throw away your metronome, because it should be all like from the heartbeat, basically. And he also says, throw away your snare drum too, because, at the end, he played, just single-headed drums, lost the snares. But I've talked to some famous musicians that, really great musicians. They're bass players, by the way, really famous on both electric and upright, that said, no, don't play with a metronome. Just, play with good players and play with good records, But if you're a studio player, you really need to play with a click. I mean, that's the thing. And a click, sometimes, you might be at 120 and they go, wow, this just doesn't feel right. Put it at 119, and then, okay, that's perfect. But if you only practice at 120 and at 116 and 112, you're going to want to gravitate muscle memory to your comfort zone. So I tell all my students, man, get comfortable with the main tempos, but always just throw your metronome wherever it lands. Get comfortable, whatever that is. It's 117. Get comfortable 117.
It's a good idea.
Because then you don't feel like, oh, this is too fast or too slow. It's just the tempo,
Yeah, another thing too, it's somewhat related, has to do with tempo, is depending upon how I felt on a certain gig or a certain part of a gig, we might be doing something really up, and then the next song was really slow.
Yeah.
And the tendency for me was to count off too quickly, and I had to kind of really take 10 seconds and think, or think of where it should be. We didn't have a click in that band with the one I'm thinking of, but it can be so easy to go too fast, and it can depend upon your mood, and how you feel and the energy with the people and the club and the vibe or the venue. So all that stuff, how we feel, our emotions, our limbic system, our brain, the
That's
energy.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
There's a lot of factors involved.
Yeah. And Mike just said something interesting, Mike Mello. He just said that, it's important to play with the click, but over time you don't even notice it. I don't notice it when I play. I'm just with it, just because I've done it so much. And I mean, I think that's kind of the one thing that's really important, is just that, tempo is something, but it's good to play with good players though, too, because, if you play with good players, the music just sort of moves naturally. If you're playing with someone that really speeds up or slows down, then you're trying to fight it. It's like can be like torture if that's happening,
Totally. Oh yeah. By the way, I just happen to remember, I don't know who I was talking about. We were talking about Keith Carlock. I saw Keith a few times with Steely Dan. That's the only time I've seen him. I'd love to see him do something else, because
I saw him with Wayne Krantz. It was great.
Oh God, that's got to be great.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah. Who was it I was talking with about Wayne Krantz the other day? Somebody. I just can't remember who, but we were talking about Keith and Wayne and that whole energy there. But they were talking about Steely Dan, and everything is a click. Like he's got a little thing down by him, and everything's a predetermined tempo, of course.
Right.
But man, that guy just flows. Talk about movement and action. What a player. Really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I find it unique how different people can move and express themselves and, create that individuality. And I really believe movement is a big part of it, not just the fingers and wrists, like you say, but the body,
Yeah, the
the,
dance.
the lean forward, the limbs, fascinating.
Even though, it's funny, the first time I saw Billy Higgins, because I was always a Billy Higgins fan, first time I saw him was at Ratso's, next to Orphans in Chicago. And I was surprised how tight he was.
Hmm.
Like elbows kind of to get, he wasn't doing that. He was very economical with his movement, which I was surprised because it didn't sound like that. If I were to close my eyes, somehow he was able to get that feeling out without using extraneous movement,
Yeah. You ever seen Brian Blade?
Sure, a lot. Yeah, he does a lot of extraneous movement. I
Yeah,
mean,
I was just thinking of the polar
yeah,
opposite of Higgins.
he attacks things. I mean, that whole thing, that's beautiful. Like, that big sweep down on a crash if you want. I mean,
Yeah.
it's also fun to watch. I mean, the audience just, gets the feeling of that, and not only the music, but it's watching someone, because that's why you go hear live music is to listen to it. If you close your eyes, you can hear it and still be entertained. But watching, people always say about Pat's band, Pat and I would smile at each other all the time. People say, "Oh, you look like you're having so much fun." Well, we were, so we were. It wasn't like a smile, like to be happy, to look happy. We were smiling because, man,
It just felt good, right?
we're feeling lucky to be there.
I remember, because like I said, saw you a few times with Pat, but one of my favorite ones was, and it was one of the reasons it was one of my favorites is because you were at an outdoor festival here, Long Branch Park, Syracuse, the Jazz Festival, and I had it was standing room only, and then there's the hill. Well, standing. You were either standing or you were on the hill with a blanket or a chair or something that you brought yourself and your own coolers and all that. Outdoor thing, really nice weather, but I was right at the stage and you were maybe 12 feet from me at the most.
Yeah.
And so, you were set up, as you look at the stage, you were to the right.
Right. Just
the stage.
Yeah. Pointing towards the center of the stage.
Yeah. Pointing. And then you and Pat could have that visual back and forth. You could see everybody could see each other. And what was really cool though, too, is because you're a right-handed player, then I got an open view from the left side, the hi-hat side.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I could really see a lot. There was nothing really blocking my view. And the energy at that show and watching your movement and your flow, I mean, I'll just never forget that. That was a really special concert that lasted a long time, and I was so happy it lasted a long time.
That's great.
Because you played into the night. It was dark by the time we left.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wow.
And, it was, I'm pretty sure those ladies were the Paris sisters.
The Paris sisters.
They were with you that night.
Oh my God. Yeah. Someone just put up they're bootlegs or something, these shows on Facebook. I don't know if you've seen, and there's one from 1985 at Pier 84. And, it's killing. I mean, you can hear me really well, which I was happy about. But also, there are a bunch of tunes that we only played that particular tour, and we were killing. I mean, I'm even listening to it going, holy moly, how in the hell, just the amount of energy we put in and just the amount of detail in every song,
and I actually have kind of like goosebumps now because I remember the impact of not just the band, and the individuals and then the collective unit, but the sisters. What they added to that was almost like a spiritual experience. I mean, it's for real. It was real deep and it was very, very moving, and I loved it. And I don't know if they ever did any recording with you. Did they record with Pat?
I don't know. I don't know, unless they did a record, and I'm not on if they did a record, but they brought that, they brought that gospel kind of feeling to the band,
But there were like four singers.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4, right.
They did do an album on their own. I picked it up because a friend of mine, Terrence Bruce, the sax player from Rochester, he played with them on that. So,
okay.
I never met them or anything. It just
they were really nice. They were sweethearts on the road. We had a lot of fun,
That one show, man, it was killer. I don't remember who else was in the band, other than the bass player there. Is it Steve? No. Yeah, Steve Robbie, right? He
Steve
came.
Robbie, yeah.
Yeah, so it was
What
you,
about him?
Steve, Pat, Lyle, and then there had to be somebody else in the band. Percussion. Who was around like 85, 86, 84? Who was playing? Was there percussion?
There was, yeah, I think it would have been. I think Pedro's on that one. You
Oh,
know,
Pedro Anzar, right? Pedro.
yeah,
Did
yeah.
he play trumpet too?
No, that would have been, David Blamires and Mark Ledford. Pedro
Okay.
played, guitar and bass and percussion,
Oh, all
berimbau
right.
and all that. I'm not sure if Armando Marsal was on that yet or not. I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look what was on that. Mike Mallow just asked about the story about the snare drum, because there's another one of those things. It's like the third gig that when Pedro and I joined in Copenhagen, which was, man, I mean, it's great to hear this stuff for me. It's not being released on CD as far as I know. It's just stuff. And so I barely, I just remember we were still learning the music because, there was no sheet music or, lead sheets as far as I knew, and, no drum charts for sure. And we actually sounded really good. I was like pleasantly surprised. But the story was the first gig I did, I just told you in Oslo when Jan Garbarek and Jan Christensen were in the audience,
Yeah.
my snare drum, because I had brought this kit from Chicago that just couldn't handle the volume we were playing. So like the second tune, the snare strainers broke off.
Oh.
And Pat doesn't like to stop the show. He's not going to, okay. So he just had like the tech come out and duct tape the snares to the bottom of the snare. So I had to play my first show with the Pat Metheny Group for like 3 hours and 45 minutes with a snare drum that sounded like a box. Could you imagine that? So when we got to Copenhagen, we went to a drum store and found this snare drum that had snares not only under the snare head, but also ones underneath the top head that you could put. So you could get like 3 different sounds. So Pat actually bought that for me for that rest of that tour,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a snares break before, just a couple times ever. And
Sure.
It's no bueno. Let me tell you, it's no fun.
Well, I've broken bass drum pedals in half. I mean, when I was in a rock band, I had a Camco pedal that, I broke the footboard in half. Mm-hmm. So then we had to take a break. We found some sticks, and not sticks. We found some pieces of wood and duct tape so I could play the rest of the show. Stuff breaks, but Pat doesn't like to stop the show. It was, because otherwise we could have just, fixed the snares, put, new strings on them and continued on, but he didn't want to do it at that time.
That's something, man. It's a story. It's one of those,
stuff.
Michael. It's
Did
one
I keep
of those
that? Mike said, yeah, I do have. Yeah, I do have that snare, actually. That's a snare I wouldn't lose because it's actually a really great snare drum. It's great with brushes too, because when you put a snare under the top head, you really get like a completely different sound out of it. Really neat. Because I used to play with my trio. A lot of times I'd take a timbale and I would tape the snares to the bottom, not the bottom. Timbale only has one head. I would tape it to the bottom of the top head and use it as a snare drum. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I did all that stuff early on when I was a kid.
You've been an innovator.
Well,
it's been
just
great.
doing what I do. I don't even,
you went,
it's nothing.
I mean, in my humble opinion, you took the path that you should have taken, because a lot of us get hung up in what we think we should be doing,
right?
Or how we should be sounding, or how the teacher says, well, you need to play like this, instead of being yourself. And maybe, and I love it when somebody like that, you have an identity. That's the thing. This is what we've been talking about. The whole theme of all the talks that I do is every person I talk with, there's a reason I want to talk with certain people. And it's because I appreciate what you have done and what you're doing and the voice you have, because you're uniquely Paul. Nobody sounds like you, and you don't sound like anybody. Can we hear influences? I could probably pick out a few, but that's how we all are. But still, you have this individual thing coming through. So you took that path. You were an innovator early on, which is cool. So you followed your heart, your gut, and look at where you're at. It's so cool. I love that, man.
No regrets, you know.
I'm so glad. See, I'm going to be 60 in June. I'm going to get my shit together and make some music.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the
call
thing
you up
is
for a couple Zoom lessons. I can PayPal you.
Yeah, we
Or
never,
Venmo
you know. I just joined Artist Access. You know what Artist Access is?
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it though.
It's this guy Caleb Chapman. He was big educational guy, and so Artist Access is where you can pay for lessons or pay for recordings or pay, you know, and it's only got, you know, certain. I think Peter Erskine's on it. There's a couple drummers on it, but they have, you know, saxophone, you know, Jeff Coffin on sax. They have really,
yeah.
It's this kind of thing. Yeah. And you know, we put our schedule up and then people can, you know, hire us for whatever,
That's
you know, because that's really good to, I also, you know, on Meat Hook too, I also done Meat Hook where Meat Hook is more of a hang where, you know, if people want to talk to me, you know, because, you know, sometimes it's nice to, you know, I love talking about this stuff, but sometimes, you know, if you feel like you're being taken advantage of by too many people just wanting to get something, and then, you know, like Meat Hook was the idea of that, you know, you get paid for it, you know. So Dennis Chambers is on Meat Hook. I'm sure, I think Peter
he
is.
just told me yesterday. He said he's on that. He just started, I think.
Yeah, well, because during the COVID thing, all of a sudden it was like, wow, you know, I mean, that way, you know, rather than meet with people live, they can do that. But it's nice to be paid for your time too, you know. Sometimes.
Yeah, you know? No doubt. No doubt.
Especially like something like this, you know, we're actually both enjoying this. But sometimes if it's just like a one-on-one conversation where someone wants to pick your brain, you know, it's nice to be nice, but then sometimes, you know, we're busy guys too.
Well, there's a limit to everything too. There's a limit to everything. I mean, you know, sometimes, like you say, people trying to get something out of you. And I know what I was going to say. Yeah, just COVID brain. Some of the best lessons I've had have been just verbal from non-drummers.
Of course.
Or drummer. Oh, Peter Erskine's taught me so much. I actually never sat down and took a formal lesson with him. But way back in the late 70s, when we used to be on the phone all through, my lessons could be 5 or 10-minute lessons. And I remember the thing he always talked about was the space between the notes.
Right.
You know, and that was something that really helped me to, well, it just helped me a lot. And, you know, I had Dave Castiglione, a sax player who played with Dave Matthews for a while. I know he knows Jeff Coffin. I've seen Jeff with Bela Fleck a few times. But anyways.
Well, that's who Howard Levy plays with too.
Oh, that's where I heard that name. Okay.
Yeah, he's the pianist and the harmonica player with Bela Fleck.
Okay. Oh, well, now I'm putting it all together. Yeah, and he was just telling me that one of the best lessons ever. So what, you know, you have all these this facility. This is at his house a few years ago. Drums and tenor sax duo, Dave and me. Says, let's go out on the front porch, drink espresso, let's talk. What's the intention behind what you're trying to say and put out there? Because you have facility and this and that. And, you know, we talked for about 2 hours about that. That was a really good lesson. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is Meat Hook or whatever, to be able to talk, you can get a lot. You can learn so much by talking and understanding and getting concepts and maybe different ways of thinking and approaching without even having to sit down next to somebody at a drum set.
Well, that's what I said about Elvin, you know, like that lesson last time that, you know, the guy Elvin was talking about movies. At one point, you know, Elvin goes, probably wondering why you're paying on a drum lesson for me to talk about movies, but when you pay for a lesson with me, you're getting me. That's exactly it. So when you talk, you're actually getting the person, and it's not always about music, you know, it's about life. And you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, because I mean, that's what we're doing. Basically, we're putting our lives into sound when we play music. That's really what we're doing, you know, and sharing emotions with other people, you know. So It's not just, you know, playing an instrument and doing all the technical and educational and, you know, theoretical stuff. It's about who we are and what we live and how we look at life, you know.
It's all connected, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Paul, man, I really enjoyed this.
Me too. It was great.
Similar to the first time, I don't want to go, but I need to soon because
it's been like, what have we been on? Like 2 hours. Oh my gosh.
A little over 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's great though. I want to thank people for watching. We have Mr.
So there's
Sanchez.
some people out there. I just see
Yeah.
Michael Mallow out there.
Jim
Thanks,
McKenzie,
Mike. Who?
Beth Hannigan, Jim McKenzie.
Okay.
There's a bunch of others on Facebook, and I can't scroll back that far for some reason. We've had quite a few people coming on through Facebook.
Okay.
So yeah, this is
Wow.
this is good. Yeah, so we've been quite a lot of views, and there will be more when I get it up on YouTube and post and tag you. But yeah, man. Well, so Michael, what do you think about? I asked Paul about doing the Paul Wertico Chronicles a few months down the road. Wait a little while, maybe do something down the road. It'll be fun. So, but hey, thanks, man. It's always, well, always, both times. It seems like from the first night we got on the phone, I felt like I kind of feel like I know this guy because the energy, your energy is another thing. I meant to say that earlier. You have this energy about you that also makes me just like excited. I want to go play drums right now. Actually, I just want to go try some things, you know. But your energy is great. I appreciate your time a lot and all that
My
you're
pleasure.
doing, all you've done. Yeah. Keep
Yeah,
up
you
the
know,
positive attitude too, man, because you have a great positive outlook to things, and I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, you want what you just said about wanting to go play drums. I mean, that's what you want to hear. You know, you don't want to hear someone come up and say, "Man, I just saw you play. I'm going to give up the drums." No, it's more about, "Man, I'm going to go play." You're supposed to inspire people, not, you know, not threaten them. You know?
Yeah.
Such thing.
I've
Most
heard
musicians
people say
that
that
love,
too.
you
I
know,
have a really good
that.
friend of mine, a good friend of mine here in Syracuse, a really great drummer, and he's like, "Oh, that's it, man. I'm going to give up." You know, we saw Jack DeJohnette together a few years ago, and he's like, "Oh, screw it." And I said, "No, don't screw it. Play, because I'm going to play. If you don't, then I'm going to get the gigs, not you." So
yeah, it's almost, I was opposite for me. Like when I'd see people that were doing things that I couldn't do or whatever, you know, rather than get intimidated by it, I would take what I could from it, but I would go, now I know another path to do that, you know, because I always thought of music as like listening to the drummer, but not just transcribing exactly what they were doing to play exactly what they were doing, but what effect they had on the music and how could I have that same effect on the music, you know, but in my own way, you know, because, you know, drummers affect the music, like we were saying, with all everything we just talked about, you know, the shapes, the tension release, all those things. So how do we do that in our own way? And it's a constant learning process, you know, you're constantly refining things, you know, keeping all your options open, but you have more options to draw from as you get older. So
all the time. It's great.
Okay.
Journey, man. All right, Paul. Well, thanks again, my friend.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Carl.
everybody, for watching. I appreciate everybody watching. This will be up on YouTube probably later tonight, and I'll tag you. But thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you for your time again, and let's stay in touch, okay?
Absolutely, man. And good luck. Stay healthy and all that, you know. I mean, wow.
I get my vaccine in a couple of weeks, the first
dose. You do?
So, yeah. I'm psyched.
Yeah, I was saying, like, getting ours was almost like winning another Grammy, you know. I mean, it was like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I'm ready for that. We'll get that situated, and then you know, things will probably get a little bit back to normal for
absolutely.
For a lot of us
they will
this year.
The world's been through many things over the centuries, you know. This is just one of them. So
for sure. All right, stay healthy, and talk to you soon, man.
Okay.
Take care.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.